June the 24th, 2015. It's 5:30 p.m. on a warm summer afternoon in South Weald, Essex. The quiet hum of suburban life is broken by the faint rustle of leaves in the garden of a picturesque cottage. Behind a fence, a shadow moves with surgical precision. An armed man, cold and calculated, leaps into the garden. 6 shots shatter the stillness. The target stumbles, blood pooling into the grass as he collapses just steps from his back door. The assailant vanishes into thin air, leaving no trace, no witnesses, no sounds, no mistakes. The sharpness of the hit left the police baffled. Initially, they failed to realise it was an assassination, mistaking the bullet wound for surgical scars from a recent operation. Palmer had undergone surgery just weeks earlier, and this crucial oversight delayed the investigation by 6 days. It wasn't until a routine autopsy that the chilling truth emerged. John Goldfinger Palmer, once Britain's richest criminal, had been executed in cold blood.
A number of individuals have stood trial for real estate fraud in Madrid for offences in Tenerife dating back to the 1990s and 2000. That trial is really key to this investigation for a number of reasons. Firstly, there was national coverage in the tabloids in the months leading up to John's murder, and the week of his murder he was informed that he was going to be one of those defendants in that trial.
This wasn't just another crime, it was a meticulously executed hit, so precise that even seasoned detectives were left dazed. The victim wasn't an ordinary man. He was a self-made multimillionaire, infamous for his alleged role in the Brinks-Mat gold heist and his staggering timeshare fraud empire that swindled thousands. At his peak, Palmer was as wealthy as the Queen, flying in private jets, dining with powerful figures, and weaving a web of criminal connections that stretched across continents. But who would dare to eliminate a man as powerful as Palmer? And what could have provoked such a high-stakes assassination? Was it linked to one of the most notorious gold robberies in British history? Or was it connected to this one that turned into a movie later? Or was it something else?
It's a day I'll never ever forget.
One of the biggest criminal investigations. Everybody wanted to know the detail.
Palmer's life, filled with luxury, notoriety and danger, made him as many enemies as it did allies. But as his wealth grew, so did his list of adversaries, be it gangsters, business rivals, and even entire crime syndicates. Whispers in the underworld suggested Palmer was prepared to expose high-ranking members of the Russian Mafia and figures connected to the Hatton Garden heist in exchange for leniency in his impending Spanish trial. But did he pay the ultimate price for that betrayal? Or was his death vengeance for something else? Let's dive into this confusing elimination that remains unsolved to this day, an incident that marked the climax of a life built on deceit, violence and greed. John Palmer's journey into infamy began far from the glamour of his later life. Born in Solihull near Birmingham, Palmer grew up in a modest household, one of 7 children. His early years showed little sign of the empire he would build one day. His story may sound like a trashy airport thriller to you, from a dyslexic 15-year-old dropout who worked for his brother Malcolm in his roofing business and later sold paraffin door to door to make ends meet, to becoming a multi-billionaire who was as rich as the Queen. But this seemingly inspiring story had a dark secret, a version of his life story that Palmer detested. A crime kingpin whose fortune owed mainly to a notorious robbery. Nevertheless, even as a 15-year-old kid who was unable to read or write, Palmer's ambition burned brighter than his circumstances allowed. By the 1970s, Palmer had entered the world of jewellery and gold dealing. He quickly realised that the glittering allure of this precious metal held the key to wealth and power. His obsession with precious metals can be concluded from the fact that he kept a sign on his office desk which read, "Remember the golden rule. He who has the gold makes the rules." However, as fond as he was of gold, he didn't like the rules very much. In fact, he liked to break them. With an uncanny ability to spot opportunities and a knack for rule-breaking, legal or otherwise, Palmer began climbing the ladder of success, though his methods often bent the rules. His big break came in 1983, when his name became entwined with one of the most infamous crimes in British history, the Brinks-Mat robbery. 6 armed men stormed a Heathrow Airport warehouse, expecting to find £3.2 million in cash, but instead stumbled upon £26 million worth of gold bullion. The heist shocked the nation. But the real challenge lay in laundering the gold. But before we go into the laundering part of the gold, let's take a look at the events of the robbery. The infamous Brinks-Mat gold robbery of 1983 remains one of Britain's most legendary heists. Its ripple effects, spanning decades, ensnared figures like John Palmer and cemented their place in criminal history. The story begins on the foggy morning of November the 26th, 1983, when 6 armed men broke into the Brinks-Mat security warehouse near Heathrow Airport. As mentioned earlier, they expected to find millions in cash, but instead stumbled upon a far greater prize: 7,000 gold bars worth £26 million, a fortune that will be valued at over £100 million today. The gang used inside information from security guard Anthony Black, who provided details about the vault and even held keys to the warehouse. Black later confessed to tipping off the gang, a decision that forever altered his life. His betrayal became one of the most infamous examples of inside jobs in UK criminal history. Nevertheless, after binding and threatening staff with petrol, the thieves made their way into the vault, where the sight of the glittering gold stunned even the seasoned criminals. The heist was not only audacious in scale, but executed with precision, with the gang departing before authorities could react. The problem for the thieves was immediately apparent, i.e., gold bars, unlike cash, need laundering. This is where the broader criminal underworld came into play, and Palmer's role, though peripheral at first, soon became critical. The gang transported the gold to smelters where it was melted down, recast into untraceable bars and funneled back into legitimate markets. To accomplish this, they needed trusted intermediaries with expertise in moving illicit goods through legal channels, and Palmer, with his background in jewellery and gold trading, became a key figure. At his luxurious Bath estate, Palmer operated a gold smelting operation that transformed the stolen bullion into a form harder to trace. When police raided his property in 1985, they discovered a smelter and evidence of large-scale operations tied to the Brinks-Mat loot. However, they later discovered documents linking Partner to offshore accounts used to launder proceeds from the gold, solidifying his reputation as a criminal mastermind.
Raided John Palmer's house. There were in fact 2 bars of gold there that were still warm, that had just come from the smelter. Unfortunately, John Palmer wasn't in residence at the time. He had left 2 or 3 days earlier to go on a holiday with his family.
However, Palmer always maintained that he had no knowledge that the gold was stolen. There is an interesting story, a mistake that he made which later strengthened his case before the court. During an interview with renowned war reporter Kate Adie for the BBC, Palmer said, "I'm completely innocent of anything to do with this so-called Mat's Brink bullion raid," saying the name the wrong way round, either deliberately or mistakenly, paid off when he later faced trial in the UK. Palmer's lawyer Henry Milner recalled, "We used it at his trial to show that unless he was giving an Oscar performance, it would show that he really did not know anything about the robbery itself." At his trial in 1987, he admitted to smelting gold bars, but insisted he was unaware of their origin. To the astonishment of many, the jury believed him, and Palmer was acquitted of handling stolen goods. As Palmer walked free, he blew kisses to the jury, earning the moniker Goldfinger. The acquittal cemented his legend in the criminal world, but it also marked him as a man who could evade the law with charm and cunning. For Palmer, the Brinks-Mat affair was not just a brush with infamy, but a stepping stone into even grander schemes. The fallout from the heist was bloody and far-reaching. Over 20 people connected to the robbery met violent ends, including suspected informants and those who had double-crossed the gang. Palmer was another one of those unfortunate people. Among these was Detective Constable John Fordham, who was fatally attacked by crime boss Kenneth Noy, Palmer's close friend and one of the key players in laundering the stolen gold. The Brinks-Mat robbery became a textbook case in the dark arts of money laundering and the perils of crossing powerful criminals. For Palmer, it marked the beginning of a life defined by high stakes and higher risks. Though he walked away from the gold smelting charges, his assassination with the heist cemented his reputation as a man willing to blur the lines between legitimate business and criminal enterprise, a reputation that would eventually contribute to his downfall. Palmer wasn't one of the robbers, but his smelting expertise was allegedly pivotal in converting the bullion into untraceable gold bars. Operating from his luxurious estate in Bath, Palmer is said to have melted millions of pounds worth of stolen gold. Though arrested and charged with handling stolen goods, Palmer claimed ignorance, insisting he did not know the gold was stolen. The jury believed him and he walked free in 1987, blowing kisses to the courtroom. It was this audacious escape from justice that earned him the nickname Goldfinger. While Palmer evaded conviction for Brinks-Mat, the trial cemented his reputation as a cunning and resourceful operator. His newfound notoriety opened doors and markets for him. Soon, he shifted his focus to the sunny shores of Tenerife, where he would build an empire that dwarfed even the gold heist in scale and audacity. Of his stay in Tenerife, this is what Goldfinger had to say. Palmer's rise to the top was fueled by his ability to exploit others' dreams. His timeshare business promised unsuspecting holidaymakers a slice of paradise. Instead, they were trapped in a web of deceit. Victims handed over their life savings for worthless contracts, supposedly buying timeshare apartments that in reality were never built, while Palmer raked in an estimated £300 million. It was one of the largest timeshare frauds in history, with over 20,000 victims. But these were not only victims Palmer strung along in his mighty enterprise. He had a large staff who wasn't happy with the way he dealt with them. But if any of them complained about inadequate rewards, they would get a smack in the mouth. Palmer's Tenerife empire was a fortress of deception, run with ruthless efficiency. His sales force, infamously called clumpers, employed intimidation and violence to dominate the timeshare market. Competitors who dare encroach on his territory often found themselves beaten, or worse. Former employees recalled Palmer's enforcers as relentless, ensuring no rival could operate without his consent. A reign of terror that defined Tenerife's underworld. Palmer's reach extended to corrupt officials and enforcers who ensured his operations remained untouchable. Palmer was a very light little fellow and hated parting with any money, said Jason Collin, a former armed robber. Amid his growing infamy, Palmer lived the life of excess and flamboyance. Helicopters, yachts and mansions became symbols of his ill-gotten wealth. He even owned a French chateau and a sprawling estate in Bath. To the outside world, he appeared untouchable, a man who had outsmarted the system and reaped the rewards. But as his fortune grew, so did his enemies lurking in the shadows. Rivals in the underworld envied his success, while law enforcement agencies across Europe began closing in. He even made it onto number 105 in the Sunday Times Rich list, rubbing shoulders in the rankings with the likes of Michael Heseltine and the Duke of Devonshire. But he could not resist boasting about his abilities to launder money to undercover reporters from the Cook Report in 1994, which led to a program called The Laundry Man, and the police were still keeping a watchful eye. The program secretly recorded him making a deal to launder the supposed criminal's money. Palmer's downfall seemed inevitable, but it wasn't until 2001 that he faced his most significant reckoning. He was convicted of masterminding his timeshare fraud and sentenced to 8 years in prison in the longest ever fraud trial in British legal history. Palmer's time behind bars did little to dull his ambition. Even in prison, authorities claimed he continued to orchestrate criminal operations. Detectives in Spain claimed that they had tapped calls of his associates, discovering that the crime boss was still giving phone call instructions. However, Palmer declared bankruptcy in 2005 with debts of just under £4 million. He was released, only to be rearrested 2 years later in 2007, this time by Spanish cops. Palmer's return to Britain marked the beginning of a precarious chapter. He spent 2 years in a high-security Spanish jail before being released on bail. He remained on Spanish police bail until his death. By 2015, Palmer was awaiting trial in Spain, a trial that carried the potential for a 15-year prison sentence. The stakes were high, and the whispers of his possible cooperation with authorities began to spread. For a man with a Rolodex of criminal contacts, these rumours were more dangerous than any courtroom. Palmer's connection to organised crime ran deep. His ties to the Russian Mafia, particularly the feared Tambovskaya gang, placed him at the nexus of a global underworld. In the 1990s, Palmer reportedly partnered with the gang to expand his timeshare operations to Russian Black Sea resorts. The Tambovskaya gang, notorious for their brutal methods and control over the Russian Black Sea resorts, leveraged Palmer's expertise to launder vast sums of money while expanding their influence into Western Europe. In his book, Killing Goldfinger, The Secret Bullet-Riddled Life and Death of Britain's Gangster Number One, renowned author Wesley Clarkson revealed that John Palmer approached the leading members of the Tambovskaya mob, known only as Misha, to thresh out a deal. He agreed to sell Misha a 50% share of his timeshare business in Tenerife. He also agreed to help set up similar timeshare branches back in Russian Black Sea holiday resorts. The Solihull crime boss even gave the Tamboyevska firm use of his private jet. However, during his time in prison, his Russian partners got a sinister idea. They seized control of the operations, and relations between them had soured. Goldfinger's links to Russia weren't a secret. In 1999, newspaper Kommersant revealed how his private plane flew over to Russia practically every week from either Tenerife or Bristol. The unholy alliance was already volatile, but went on to the brink of snapping when Palmer went to jail in 2001. That's when they grabbed the chance and seized control of Palmer's operations. Later, when the authorities launched a major investigation into Palmer's activities, Mafia hoods became twitchy with fear that Palmer would turn grass. Palmer wasn't oblivious to the sword looming over his head. It wasn't just him aware of the threats. His execution was predicted by one of his own Iraqi bodyguards. Palmer's dealings weren't limited to Russia. His name had been linked to high-profile criminal figures in the UK and Europe, many of whom had as much to lose as Palmer himself. Authorities speculated that his elimination may have been orchestrated by individuals seeking to silence him before his Spanish trial could commence. John Palmer was tending to his garden at his Southweald home in Essex on the day of his death. He had been informed a week ago that he was up to be one of the defenders in the trial. He had been burning documents at the time, which could have been preparation for the trial. However, unbeknownst to Palmer, a hitman was lying in wait, watching him through a hole drilled in his garden fence. The attack was swift and brutal. The hitman, concealed by the cover of Palmer's garden fence, fired 6 shots in rapid succession, each striking with deadly accuracy. The sound was muffled by a silencer, leaving no echo in the quiet suburban neighbourhood. The precision and efficiency of the assassination bore all the hallmarks of a professional hit. Palmer managed to scramble back home, but later succumbed to the injuries. Nevertheless, in a stunning oversight, police and paramedics initially failed to recognise the wound from bullets. The investigation into Palmer's elimination was marred by a crucial misstep. When police and paramedics arrived at his £800,000 Brentwood property, they noted surgical scars on his chest from a recent gallbladder operation and assumed they accounted for his injuries. His death was labelled as non-suspicious, and the scene was not immediately treated as a crime scene. This critical error jeopardised the collection of forensic evidence, such as footprints or DNA traces, which could be compromised or lost entirely, a fact that would haunt the investigation in the days to follow. 6 days later, during a routine post-mortem examination, the truth came to light. The pathologist discovered that Palmer had been hit 6 times in the chest with a small caliber firearm, possibly fitted with a silencer. The precision of the shooting, and the absence of any disturbance at the crime scene, suggested that the hit was meticulously planned and executed by professionals. By the time the revelation was made, vital evidence of the crime scene was likely lost or compromised, significantly setting back the investigation. Essex police, now scrambling to recover from their earlier mistake, launched a murder investigation that would uncover layers of complexity surrounding Palmer's life and death. One of the most chilling details was the discovery of a small hole drilled in the garden fence near to where Palmer had been burning documents. Investigators concluded that the hole was used by the assassin to monitor Palmer's movements. The assailant had likely spent considerable time studying Palmer's routines to ensure the hit was carried out during a rare moment where he was alone and unprotected. CCTV footage revealed Palmer alive and moving about his garden just minutes before the attack. Yet the cameras failed to capture the assailant or the act itself, as the attack occurred in one of the few areas of the property not covered by surveillance. This blind spot, coupled with the absence of witnesses and the use of a silenced weapon, left detectives with few immediate leads. Essex police admitted their failure, disciplining the officers involved, but stopping short of labelling their actions gross misconduct. Palmer's elimination sent shockwaves through the criminal underworld. His death was not an isolated incident, but part of a larger string of violence and intrigue. In the years leading up to his assassination, other individuals linked to Palmer and the timeshare industry had met similarly grim fates. Among those tied to John Palmer's world, a chilling pattern emerged, one of unexplained deaths and brutal eliminations that hinted at the dangers lurking in the shadows of the criminal network. From former associates to victims caught in the crossfire of his operations, the fallout from Palmer's dealings was widespread and often deadly. In 2006, Billy and Flo Robinson, a British couple linked to Palmer's timeshare empire, were brutally eliminated near their home in Tenerife. Billy suffered multiple stab wounds and Flo was horrifically mutilated. Authorities suspected that the executions were an act of revenge, tied to Eastern European criminals attempting to muscle in the timeshare market. The Robinsons had worked in an office connected to Palmer, and some speculated that their deaths were a warning aimed at Palmer himself. Another associate, Dennis New, once a trusted lieutenant in Palmer's timeshare operations, was found dead in 2015 in Thailand. Official reports attributed his death to an ongoing medical issues, but rumours swirled about a more sinister cause. New had been part of Palmer's inner circle during his Tenerife reign, and his death occurred just months before Palmer's own elimination. The timing raised questions about whether someone was systematically eliminating those tied to Palmer's enterprises. The violence extended beyond Palmer's immediate circle. In 2005, former British soldier Dale Moore was found dead in a cargo container in Tanzania. Moore, a fit and healthy 40-year-old non-smoker, had reportedly been linked to Palmer through a private security work. While his death was officially ruled as a heart attack, family members expressed doubts, citing his suspicious circumstances and the body's condition upon its return to the UK. Moore's demise added another layer of mystery to the growing list of deaths connected to Palmer. As investigators delved deeper into Palmer's elimination, they explored numerous theories. While Palmer had many notorious criminal incidents linked to his name, timeshare, gold smelting, another major criminal incident that could have closed the lid on his life was Hatton Garden heist. It was a high-profile jewellery robbery that occurred just 2 months before his death. The robbery entailed a £14 million raid on a central London jewellery store. Although never a suspect himself in the raid, Palmer was linked to the oldest member of the Hatton Garden gang, Brian Reeder, who was also connected with the gold heist of the 1980s alongside Goldfinger. However, the rumours suggested he had something more to do with the heist than just being linked to the ringleader. Here's a glimpse into the heist, captured on CCTV. Can you believe how relaxed they were while lugging stolen items? Here comes the other one. Palmer's long-standing relationship with Brian Reeder, along with these rumours, fueled speculation that he possessed knowledge dangerous to those involved. Rumours suggested Palmer could have revealed the identity of Basil, the heist's mysterious and elusive member, or that he held incriminating evidence against the gang. Others believed Palmer's elimination was tied to his impending Spanish trial. The charges he faced were severe, and the possibility of him cooperating with the authorities loomed large. The idea that Palmer might turn informants to secure leniency was enough to make him liable to his former allies, other than the Russian Mafia. Detective Chief Inspector Jennings noted that Palmer's elimination bore all the hallmarks of a contract-style killing, likely to be orchestrated by someone high up in the criminal hierarchy. Despite years of exhaustive investigations and countless theories, no arrests have ever been made, leaving Palmer's assassination one of Britain's most perplexing cold cases. Over 700 lines of inquiry have been pursued, 1,400 documents reviewed, and hundreds of witness statements collected, but the assailant and those who commissioned the hit have eluded justice. A few theories suggest financial conflicts, given he had swindled plenty of people. The same could be said of the possibility of personal vendettas. Palmer didn't discriminate between his associates and outsiders when it came to money. He didn't pay his staff properly, including his associates. Some of them may have double-crossed him as a payoff. Another theory, similar to the previous ones, maintains that Palmer kept safe deposit boxes that contained incriminating evidence against prominent figures in the underworld. Someone got wind of it and tried to recover or suppress the information. Palmer's death, shrouded in secrecy and violence, is emblematic of the shadowy world he inhabited. It's a world where fortunes were built on deceit, and betrayal often carried a fatal price. Detective Chief Inspector Stephen Jennings, who led the investigation, speculated that Palmer's elimination was likely commissioned by someone very high up in the criminal underworld. The timing, he suggested, was critical. Palmer's impending Spanish trial and his ties to ongoing investigations created a sense of urgency amongst those who feared he might betray them. Despite the weight of the speculation, concrete evidence proved elusive. The investigation into Palmer's assassination has remained one of the UK's most challenging cold cases. Despite offers of substantial rewards and a BBC Crime Watch appeal, leads have been scarce. Palmer's widow, Christina Ketley, and his family continue to call for justice, but their pleas have yet to yield answers. The shadow of his death looms large over the lives of those connected to him, a strong reminder of the violent and unforgiving world which he once dominated. Nevertheless, despite his involvement with the criminal world, his family reeled not only from their loss, but also from the lack of knowledge about the assassin. A £50,000 reward for information offered by Palmer's family yielded no substantial leads. One of the most haunting aspects of the case is the unanswered question of who ultimately ordered the hit. Was it a rival criminal organisation fearing exposure or revenge? A former ally betrayed by Palmer? Or was it part of a larger conspiracy involving international crime syndicates? Each theory offers tantalising possibilities, but no definitive answers. For some, the reality of Palmer's elimination is that it may never be attributed to a single motive or perpetrator. His vast network of enemies, combined with his precarious legal position, meant that multiple parties had reasons to see him dead. From underworld figures fearing exposure to international syndicates seeking to protect their interests, the list of potential suspects is as complex as Palmer's own criminal career. Despite extensive investigations, no arrests have been made and the case remains open. The aftermath of John Palmer's death has left a legacy of unanswered questions and unresolved tensions, not only within the criminal underworld, but also in the justice system tasked with bringing his killer to light. While the details surrounding his assassination suggest a professional hit, the lack of conclusive evidence has left investigators grappling with a case that seems to grow colder with each passing year. The trail of evidence, or lack thereof, only added to the mystique of Palmer's elimination. Adding to the complexity was Palmer's long-standing surveillance by Secret Service officers for at least 16 years. Reports revealed that he had been monitored as part of Operation Alpine, a covert operation spanning nearly 2 decades from RAF Spade Adam in Cumbria since 1999. A former intelligence officer who did not wish to be identified said the Serious and Organised Crime Agency, now the National Crime Agency, had gathered intelligence on Palmer from Cumbria because of concerns of corruption in the Metropolitan Police Service. The team there then collated the info together, and some of that intel was used to inform police investigations into various parts of his criminal organisations, the officer said. We knew what police officers he had in his pocket, what other criminals he was mixing with and using for various criminal enterprises. Despite the extensive surveillance, Operation Alpine failed to act decisively due to fears of corruption within the Metropolitan Police, allowing Palmer to continue his operations unchecked for years. Moreover, even such long-standing surveillance couldn't prevent the death of an ex-crime boss. What does it say about our legal system? Do you think the police are to be blamed here for their negligence and oversight? Let us know in the comments. After almost a decade of his death, theories about the motive behind Palmer's death continue to abound, each as plausible as the last. Whether it was a move to silence him, eliminate a rival, or settle a grudge, the true reason for Palmer's execution is known only to those who orchestrated it. What is clear, however, is that Palmer's death marked the end of the era of a British organised crime. His life, filled with extravagance and criminality, came to a brutal end in a manner befitting the dangerous world he inhabited. For investigators and the public, the unanswered questions surrounding his elimination serve as a reminder of the challenges posed by the criminal underworld, a world where loyalty is fleeting and silence is often enforced at the barrel of a gun. Palmer's life and death also sparked a broader conversation about the influence of wealth in insulating individuals from accountability. His ability to amass and retain such power exposed weaknesses in law enforcement and regulatory systems, sparking calls for reform in tackling organised crime. Despite numerous accusations and convictions, Palmer continued to enjoy a lavish lifestyle, owning helicopters, luxury properties and a French chateau. His ability to maintain such opulence while embroiled in legal battles demonstrated the resilience of his criminal enterprise and the challenges authorities faced in dismantling it. On a societal level, Palmer's timeshare fraud and other schemes left an indelible mark on his victims. Tens of thousands of people were swindled out of their life savings, leading to financial ruin and immense personal distress. Palmer's exploitation of legal loopholes and his manipulation of vulnerable individuals spotlighted the need for stricter oversight and enforcement mechanisms to protect consumers. In the years following Palmer's death, his name has remained synonymous with both audacity and tragedy. Books, documentaries, and investigative reports have continued to dissect his life, crimes, and mysterious end, ensuring his story remains etched in the public consciousness. For the communities affected by his fraudulent schemes and the violence surrounding his operations, his legacy is one of loss and caution. Even within the criminal fraternity, Palmer's downfall stands as a lesson about the perils of overreaching ambition and misplaced alliances. His meteoric rise and brutal fall are a reminder that, in the world of organised crime, power is as fleeting as it is intoxicating. As time passes, the unanswered questions surrounding his death and the motivations behind it ensure that John Palmer remains an enigmatic figure, whether viewed as a cunning mastermind, a victim of betrayal, or a man who met his inevitable fate. His legacy continues to evoke fascination, fear and debate. The echoes of his life and death ripple through the worlds he inhabited and the systems he tried but often failed to hold him accountable. John Goldfinger Palmer lived a life that few could imagine, straddling the worlds of unimaginable wealth and unfathomable crime. His rise to becoming Britain's richest criminal was matched only by the brutal mystery of his downfall. From masterminding fraud schemes that ruined thousands to being linked with global mafias and high-profile heists, Palmer's story remains one of intrigue, betrayal and violence. His violent end mirrored the chaos and danger he had cultivated throughout his life. A calculated professional hit left a community shaken, law enforcement scrambling and the underworld whispering. With ties to the Russian Mafia, suspicions of turning informant, and connections to unsolved crimes like the Hatton Garden heist, Palmer's death was as layered and complex as his life. Even in death, Palmer's shadow looms large, with unanswered questions about who ordered his elimination and why. Was it the Russian Mafia, a rival gang, or fears that he might turn a supergrass? Or was it all of the above in a criminal web so vast and tangled that its secrets will never fully be revealed? What do you think? Will the mystery behind Britain's richest criminal's death ever be solved, or will it remain buried in the shadows of his empire? Let us know your thoughts.